So our second study in the book of Proverbs, and so we're on. As we talked about, we'll try to go through one of these topics every class, and so the topic for tonight is wisdom. We talked about a little bit about introduction to Proverbs on Sunday, and somebody want to give me a definition of a proverb? What in the world is a proverb? We're going to be studying on what would you say a proverb is? Wendell said it was knowledge in action. Somebody's quoting you, Wendell. Knowledge in action, that's true. I got a short, meaningful saying stating a general truth or a piece of advice. Brief, forceful, meaningful expression, a saying, a wise saying. So the book of Proverbs, and who did we say wrote the book of Proverbs? Solomon wrote the majority of Proverbs, and Kings tells us that he wrote over 3,000 Proverbs. And this collection that we've got in this book, if you count them all, they say there's around 800 of them. So there's lots of Proverbs that Solomon wrote that we do not have. And what did we say? One of our questions was, what is the main theme of Proverbs? What would you say the main theme of Proverbs is? Sorry? Wisdom from God. We all know lots of things. We all got lots of facts. We can Google anything we want. We've got millions of facts at our fingertips, but there's a big difference in having facts and having wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to use the facts that we have in a godly way, as we'll learn from Proverbs. God provided Solomon with these Proverbs, and they're recorded for us, and there are lots of life lessons to be learned in Proverbs. Lots of things that we can use in our daily life. So we're gonna look at wisdom tonight, and if you look at your on page 4, the second sentence there says, "Wisdom is the right use of one's knowledge, insight, and skill to the glory of God." So if you got a lot of wisdom, you have the right use of your knowledge, insight, and skill to the glory of God. And we talked about Solomon, and he was said to have been the wisest man of all. But we know that you can be wise and still make mistakes. And Solomon made mistakes, and we talked about those a little bit on Sunday, on Sunday. Let's see. Let's look at some of the. It originates. It says this wisdom originates in the fear of God. So it lists a few verses for us to look at here. And if you studied your lesson, there's lots of verses to look at and read, and a lot of those will certainly help us as we go through this. But Proverbs 1:7 is the first one it lists there, talking about wisdom originates with the fear of God. Proverbs 1 and verse 7. Somebody want to read that for me?
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and instruction.
Okay, so that one we've heard over and over again. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So the person that wants to please God, he's got this reverent fear, this awe of God, and but fools, they already know it all. They don't want that. They don't want that wisdom or instruction. The next verse it lists is Proverbs 9 and verse 10, and these are all pretty much say the similar things. But just the theme here, that the fear of the Lord. If you got the fear of the Lord, that'll help you in gaining the wisdom that you should have. Proverbs 9 and verse 10. Somebody want to read that?
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, knowledge of the holy.
Okay, again there. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So the foundation that gets us started on understanding what wisdom is to have a reverent fear of the Lord. Again, that was in 9 and 10. And then, let's see, how about Psalms? Psalms talks about that as well. Psalms 111. And verse 10. Psalms 111 and verse 10. Somebody got that one?
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. With understanding and all that do his commandment. His praise endures forever.
Okay, there's that. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom again, but the second part of that, a good understanding have all those who do his commandments. So if you're wise and you've got a good understanding of what God wants you to do, you're going to do his commandments. And then it says his praise endures forever. So if you've got this fear and you got a good understanding of what God wants you to do and you obey his commandments, then you're going to have his praise forever. And I don't know what could be better than that. So fear of the Lord certainly is the foundation of wisdom, that respect and reverence that we should have. It goes on to say there that worldly wisdom is knowledge apart from divine revelation and is often God opposing. True wisdom is the ordering of one's life by God's given counsel. If you want true wisdom, then you know God's word and you follow God's word, and through that knowledge and through experience, then you'll gain the wisdom that you need to be a righteous person in this earth, on this life. The definition that it gives for wisdom there in part A is wisdom enables one to turn every good thing in life to a rightful purpose. It is something more than wit, shrewd common sense, or even worldly prudence. It is something more than intellectual excellence, in that it applies a spiritual and moral quality of heart, will, and life, and its practical application of knowledge to its best end. So that's the definition that we've talked about already. So this wisdom is a practical application of the facts and knowledge we have to the best end of pleasing God and doing what's right in God's eyes. So wisdom is certainly something that we ought to strive for, try to get more. And we talked about James. And so how does James tell us to get wisdom? Pray for it. Pray for wisdom. And how much will he give us? Abundantly. It says in James, he'll give it to us abundantly, but you got to pray for it. You got to ask for it. You can't, there's work to do. There's action to be had to gain this wisdom that you need. And who are if you were thinking about the wisest person you know, wisest person in your life what age would that person be? Usually older. Why is that, Ron?
Through more years of experience and learning, you acquire more knowledge.
Okay. So the older we get, the more experience that we have, the more life experiences that we deal with, and we hopefully gain wisdom by doing that. There's a reason that we don't let presidents become presidents at 20 years old, because we don't think they're wise yet. They haven't experienced things that they'll have to experience to make good decisions. And so I know you can be wise at a young age. I know some wise people that are young, but generally, the older we are, the more experience that we have, the more life issues that we've dealt with, the more wisdom we say that person has. So most of the time, we think of people who are elderly or older that have been through a lot, and they've got a lot of wisdom, and they can share it with us and help us to be smarter as we move along. Wisdom, it says in part B, is not something to do, but rather it's a way of doing things. Wisdom is finding in your own circumstances specific opportunities to use a proverb, and then following through in your actions with what was before only a general principle or an idea. Following through, having some action, carrying that forward. So, lots of verses to look at here. It talks about wisdom in A, B, C, and D. It talks about the call of wisdom in A, the value of wisdom in B, the security of having wisdom in C, the rewards of wisdom, and D, the way of wisdom versus folly, and then F, God's relation to wisdom. And there's a ton of verses to look at there. So I think we'll be reading several verses tonight, but all these kind of, they fit together in a lot of these answers. But let's just start in chapter 1. Talks about the call of wisdom. And you'll notice when we talk about wisdom here, and it's normally in the first 8 verses particularly, wisdom is personified. So what do we mean by wisdom is personified? Okay, it takes on the personality of somebody. And what is wisdom most generally personified as in Proverbs? A woman. Jason? Tell us why that is.
Well, Solomon is talking to his son here. He's imparting wisdom to his son, and he's talking to him in things that he would understand. And he oftentimes makes a difference in like what kind of woman would you look for, wise versus foolish. And I think that's he's really coming from it from that angle.
Okay, so if you look at Proverbs Proverbs 1 and verse 8, you'll see what Jason is talking about there. A lot of the, like 8 and verse 1, it says, my son. So Solomon is talking like a father to a son. My son, hear the instructions of your father. Do not forsake the law of your mother. And then if you look at Proverbs 2, it starts out, my son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you. So there's several, chapter 3, my son, do not forget my law, but keep your heart, but let your heart keep my commands. So in verse 11, my son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord. We've heard this one before, haven't we? My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as the Father the Son in whom he delights. So, to Jason's point, Solomon, throughout at least the first 8 chapters, is kind of depicting the father to the son, and then, but when he begins to talk about wisdom, he uses the personification of a woman. If you look at starting in verse 20, and I kind of got off track where I was going, but Proverbs 1 and verse 20, we'll see that where he says, wisdom calls aloud outside. She, my version says, she raises her voice in the open squares. She cries out in the chief concourses and at the openings of the gates in the city. She speaks her words. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? For scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. Turn in my rebuke. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. Because I have called you and you refused, I have stretched out my hand and no one regarded. Because you disdained all my counsel and would have none of my rebuke, I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes. When your terror comes like a storm, when the destruction comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, then you will call on me, but I will not answer. Then you will seek me diligently, but they will not find me. Because they hated knowledge, they did not choose the fear of the Lord. So we going on through 33, but it talks about wisdom and how wisdom calls out like this lady. She calls out with a loud voice, it says in verse 2, crying and trying to get people to understand and to do what's right. They reject her, and then it talks about what happens because of that rejection. Because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, they would have none of my counsel and despise my every rebuke. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their own way and be filled to the full with their own fancies. For the turning away of the simple, or my version says naive, will slay them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without the fear of evil. So wisdom is depicted or personified here as this lady calling out for us to listen, but they would not listen, and because of that, they were destroyed. But verse 33, those that do listen, but whoever listens to this wisdom will dwell with me safely and will be secure without fear of evil, which I think is is a place that we would all like to be. We'd like to have that security. And so wisdom is calling. Wisdom calls on all of us, and whether we answer or not is up to us. Sometimes we answer correctly, and if we do that, then we've got peace and we got harmony. If we don't answer correctly, then bad things happen. We make bad choices. We don't use the knowledge that we have properly, and it says that it calls us simple and naive and all the things that happen when wisdom calls on us and we don't answer. So the first question says, what was the price for the rejection of wisdom?
Fear of evil and hard times.
You'd have fear of evil, hard times. Verse 32 says that they'll be slayed and they will be destroyed because they had this call, but they didn't use it properly. So the other verses that it lists there is Proverbs 8, 1 through 11. I think it's good to read these. We can kind of understand over and over again what we got wisdom crying out here again in Proverbs 8. Somebody want to read Proverbs 8, 1 through 5, and then somebody else read 6 through 11.
Okay, 1 through 5.
Okay?
Does not wisdom call, and understanding lift up her voice? On top of the heights, beside the way, where the paths meet, beside the gates, at the opening to the city, at the entrance of the doors, she cries out, "You, O men, I call. My voice is to the sons of men. O naive ones, understand prudence."
Okay, so we got wisdom crying out here again, being personified as a lady. She see the word she there in verses 2 and 3. So we got this wisdom calling out. How about 6 through 11? Thanks, Tim.
Listen, for I will speak of excellent things. From the opening of my lips will come right things. My mouth will speak truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are with righteousness. Nothing crooked or perverse is in them. They are all plain to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Receive my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. Wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things one may desire cannot be compared with her.
Okay, so the value of this wisdom, if used properly, says it's better than rubies, and all the things that one may desire cannot be compared with her. So you can't put a value on somebody that's wise and uses good wisdom and is prudent, makes good decisions. So the wisdom calls, and it's up to us whether we answer or not. And the value of answering properly it's better than rubies. The call that we get. Part B, the value of wisdom. What do the Proverbs say about godly wisdom? And lots of verses there to look at. We should have just let's go to 2 chapter 2, talking about the value of wisdom. And I think I read this Sunday morning, starting verse 1. My son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you, so that you incline your heart to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding, yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, if you do all those things, it says, then you will understand the fear of the Lord. There's that fear of the Lord again. And find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk uprightly. All these attributes of the person that is wise. He guards the path of the justice and preserves the way of the saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice, equity, and every good path. So, lots of valuable things that the person that has wisdom, they understand the fear of the Lord. They find the knowledge of God. They find happiness, And then let's look at chapter 3, 13 through 18. I think that's Proverbs chapter 3, 13 through 18. Wendell, you got that?
13 through 18.
Yes, sir?
Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, man that getteth understanding. For the merchandise is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies. All the things that cannot desire are not to be compared with her. Length of days is in her right hand, her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, out of her paths are peace. She is a tree of life. Them that lay hold upon her, happy is everyone that
Retains?
retaineth her.
Retains her. Happy are all who retain her. So again, this wisdom and all that wisdom brings, and there's if you got wisdom, it says you're happy. Happy is the man who finds wisdom. Who doesn't want to be happy? Her proceeds are better than silver and gold. Length of days is in her right hand, and we'll see that several times in Proverbs. It talks about if you use wisdom, then your days are going to be probably lengthened a little bit. Why is that?
Foolish decisions
Okay.
can lead to catastrophic things.
Okay. So if we're doing the right things and doing things in the right way, then we'll probably live a little longer. We know people that go out and do terrible things and drugs and alcohol and all those things, and their lives don't last very long. But length of days is in her right hand. If you use wisdom, there's a good chance that your days are going to be prolonged. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but there is a good chance that you'll live longer if you find wisdom and use it. And then verse 17, her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. So who doesn't want peace and pleasantness? I think all of us would say we would love to have that. And I love that verse 18. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who retain her. A tree of life. So how would wisdom be a tree of life to those who take hold of her?
Tree is something that continually produces
Okay.
over and over. It's not just like a one-time thing.
Okay.
It's like a constant sustenance.
Okay.
That's the way wisdom works. It's not something that you get once and you sort of live out for the rest of your life holding on to that little piece of wisdom you got there, but it's constant,
Okay.
never renewing.
Okay.
Keep getting more.
So as Jason said, wisdom is not something you just, well, I've got it now. I won't learn anymore. As we grow, as we mature, and we'll continue to gain knowledge, that will increase our wisdom. And I think one of our questions says, at what age do we gain wisdom? And you gain it at every level. You gain it when you're young, you gain it when you're middle-aged, when you're older, you still get wisdom. Wisdom is something that you strive to get, and you attain it along the way. But it's better than silver and gold. And then another one that talks about the sweetness of wisdom, I think is 24, Proverbs 24. Proverbs 24, 13 and 14. Proverbs 24, 13 and 14 talk about the sweetness of wisdom. Verse 13, my son, eat honey because it is so sweet, and the honeycomb which is sweet to your taste. So shall the knowledge of wisdom be to your soul. And if you have found it, there is a prospect, and your hope will not be cut off. So it talks about wisdom being sweet as honey. And we all like sweetness, I think. I do. And if we got this knowledge of wisdom, it's just sweet to us like honey and like the honeycomb. So wisdom puts a great taste in our mouth, and it's very valuable to us, and we should be searching for wisdom as we mature and grow. Anything else on B there on the value of wisdom? You can't put a value on it. Part C talks about the security of wisdom. And the question is, how does wisdom keep one secure and protected? And I think we may have already looked at it, but chapter 2, go back to chapter 2. No, we haven't looked at these. 10 through, we'll just read a few of these verses. Chapter 2, 10 through, well, I'll read it all. I got it here, I like it. Proverbs chapter 2, starting in verse 10. We're talking about the security. See where you see the security of wisdom. When wisdom enters your heart and knowledge is pleasant to your soul, discretion will preserve you, understanding will keep you. To deliver you from the way of evil, from the man who speaks perverse things, for those who leave the paths of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perversity of the wicked, whose ways are crooked and who are devious in their paths, to deliver you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. For her house leads to death, and her paths to the dead. None who go to her return, nor do they regain the paths of life. So you may walk in the way of goodness and keep to the paths of righteousness. For the upright will dwell in the land, and the blameless will remain in it, but the wicked will be cut off from the earth, and the unfaithful will be uprooted from it. So it talks about the security we have. Verse 21, I should have started there. For the upright will dwell in the land, and the blameless will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the earth, and the unfaithful will be uprooted from it. So throughout verses 10 through 22 there, it talks about, depicts wisdom as, you've got the evil versus the good. And the evil certainly walks crooked paths and does immoral things, but the path of the upright is straight and leads to righteousness, and that's certainly where we all would desire to go. So, we can read a bunch of these verses, and they all say a lot of the same thing, but these verses talk about the security that we have if we use wisdom, that our paths will be straight. We'll be doing what's right. We'll be doing the right things. And certainly that leads us to where we want to be. Part D talks about the rewards of wisdom. And we've already talked about some of them, but those verses, if you look at them, talks about happiness, peace, that tree of life thing again. We'll embrace that tree of life. So using wisdom makes us so much better. And our life will be so much better if we use wisdom in our decisions and in our life. Any thoughts on C or D there? Part E talks about the way of wisdom versus the way of folly, and we'll find that throughout when we get to looking into the other chapters. Let's look at just 19:8, just a short one, 19:8. Proverbs 19 and verse 8. Proverbs 19 and verse 8 says, "He who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will find good." So, very short. We talked about these Proverbs, very short, not many words there, but they say a lot. He who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He's going to do what's right. He's going to protect his soul. He who keeps understanding will find good. If you make right decisions and do right things and use wisdom, you're going to find good. And certainly we all want what's good and what's peaceful and what's righteous. So wisdom helps us to get that. And wisdom is a great thing to be searching for. God's relationship to wisdom, the question is, what does this tell us about the source for acquiring such wisdom? Describe God's relationship with wisdom. So how about 3:19 and 20? God's relationship to wisdom. Where did wisdom come from? When did wisdom come about? 3:19 and 20. Somebody want to read 19 and 20 for me?
established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths were broken up, the clouds dropped down the dew.
So the Lord, by his wisdom, founded the earth. So the Lord, the wisest of all, of course, but so God's relationship to wisdom is, God is wisdom. God founded wisdom. It all began, it ends with God. God is without God, we don't get the kind of wisdom that we need. And he provides it for us in his word. So we can read Proverbs and we can find some really, really good things about what God is giving us in these words. But so God is the foundation of all wisdom, and we may have knowledge and we may have facts, but if we don't have the godly wisdom that we need and see in Proverbs, then we can't really be as successful as we could be. Okay, so we've read several verses. Let's look at some of these questions. And somebody in their own words, give me a definition for wisdom in your own words. Okay, common sense. We haven't talked about that word, common sense, to be able to speak to others who need to understand what they need to do. That's a good one. Common sense. Wisdom is a lot of common sense. We know people that just don't have good horse sense, Wendell, we used to say. They're pretty smart, but they don't have any horse sense. Common sense is an uncommon thing, isn't it? In this world, it seems that way. Anybody else? Definition?
Something I'll say on that is God's wisdom allows us to see Him in some of the ordinary things.
Okay.
So I mean, there is such a thing as worldly wisdom apart from God.
Right.
But there is a way to look at the world that God has created in a way that makes us see Him in those things.
Okay.
I think Solomon's a great example of that because he uses all kinds of things in the animal kingdom or plants and talks about how, look at the slug, look at, the ant.
The ant.
Those sorts of things, it helps train us to see God in those situations.
Okay.
So we can constantly be reflecting on Him and applying those principles in our conversations with our kids, with other people. And it's just helpful for us to think about too.
Okay. So we should think as Solomon did and see God in all the phases of our life, all the things that we're dealing with. See God and His power there and His ability. Certainly that's very good. Thanks, Jason. Anybody else? Common wisdom in your own words?
Wisdom is special in the sense of we're not born with this. Ron gets 100, 110, the number 110 on wisdom, and this next kid he gets 140, and this next kid gets 60. It's not like IQ. It's not like this kid's good at math. Especially because everybody can have it.
Okay.
So everybody can acquire wisdom. So it all comes down to choices. So it's making, not godly wisdom, making godly choices that lead you closer and closer.
Okay, great. Making godly choices that lead you closer and closer to Him. Great definition of wisdom. And I think we've talked about this before, but it's certainly not IQ. Some of the wisest people I know would not have scored high on an IQ test, but they were able to take the experiences in their life, the things that they had been through to make wise decisions, and they were able to share that with other people so that they could make good decisions too. I wrote the ability to live life skillfully with the knowledge and experience you've learned along the way. Wisdom, ability to live life skillfully. Some people never get that. They never attain that skill because they're not looking for wisdom in the proper way.
Think about James chapter 2, talk about it's a work. You have to, like Ron said, in Proverbs chapter 2, it's gift. My son's gift. I mean, it's
Okay.
conditional. You got to receive, incline, cry, seek, understand. In Matthew 7, ask, seek, knock. I mean,
Okay,
There's a lot of work that's got to be put into it, but it's worth the effort.
okay. It just doesn't come to you naturally. You got to work at it. As we talked about earlier, it's an action. You gotta be going after, you pray for it and seek it, and hopefully you can find the wisdom that you need. Where does this wisdom originate? Originates from God, certainly. Fear of the Lord, the desire for the knowledge of God, all something that we should be striving for. And then number 3, does having wisdom guarantee we'll live by wisdom? No, we got a great example of Solomon. He was the wisest of all, and he made at least 599 mistakes. How do we know that? Because he had 600 wives, so he made 599 mistakes. Now I'm not even going to talk about the concubines. There was 300 of those, but no, it was 700 wives. 699 mistakes. So he made a lot of mistakes, but he was still thought of as the wisest of all time. And kings and queens and Queen of Sheba all came to learn of the wisdom of Solomon, and he never failed to display that. But just because you have wisdom doesn't mean that you're going to always live by it and do the right thing. But if you put God in the middle of it and use godly skill and God's influence, and hopefully you'll use that wisdom in the proper way. Number 4, someone has suggested 7 pillars, and we read that in 9:1. 7 pillars which uphold wisdom. Explain each of these pillars and describe what each contributes to wisdom. So we've already talked about a few of these. Some of these we didn't talk about. What about? We know what understanding is and how you got to have that to have wisdom. We know you got to have knowledge. Knowledge is an ingredient that you got to have to gain this wisdom. What about prudence? What is prudence? Okay. Use caution. Did you hear that? Use caution. If somebody's prudent, it means they're cautious. They're not just, I wrote down caution in regard to practical matters, in their discretion in choices that they make. They're just always prudent about that. They're not quick to make decisions, but they're cautious. And that's what the definition of prudence is. What about shrewdness? Anybody shrewd? You do? Well, you're looking at it like it's a negative thing. So, okay, good powers of judgment. Tim knows folks that are shrewd in trying to swindle somebody, I guess it's where. All right, okay. It's fine. Shrewdness, acute in perception, sound in judgment, somebody that's shrewd. What about discretion? We know what instruction is. What about discretion? Somebody uses good discretion. Okay, sound judgment, good judgment, godly judgment. Somebody's discreet. And then the final one was perception. Somebody's got good perception of things. Tuition. You have to recognize or observe. Somebody's looking at the big picture. So all those things are characteristics, it says, of a wise person. They have understanding and knowledge and prudence and shrewdness, and instruction and discretion and perception. So all those were qualities of that wise person. Number 5, who can benefit from the wisdom contained within this book? The simple and the inexperienced, or the mature?
Because you have to listen to it.
Have to listen to it, okay? Then Proverbs 1, 4, and 5 talks about in verse 4 to give prudence to the simple or the naive, to the young, number 5, in verse 5, a wise man and a man of understanding. So I think it's saying every age level can learn from this book, because it's for all of us, all the above, simple, young, wise. Anybody can learn from the book of Proverbs. It's number 7, since we're running out of time. Is the wise man the man who knows it all, or the man who knows he does not know it all? The second one. I circled 26:12. Let's see what it says. Proverbs 26:12. Proverbs 26:12. Says, do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. Not so. This person that is wise in his own eyes says there's more hope for a fool than for him. Do we know people that are wise in their own eyes? Do we like to hang out with those people? No, we don't. We don't really like to be around people that think they know everything. And that's the person that's wise in his own eyes. And it says there's more hope for a fool. And then lean not on your own understanding. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Another verse that's in Proverbs. So this number 9, I don't know if you had time to look at that, but it says there's many verses in the New Testament that talk about wisdom. We're just talking about the ones in the Old Testament here. But I was looking through there and got looking at a list of them, and I listed about 25 verses in the New Testament that talk about wisdom and how we can use wisdom. So it's not just a Proverbs thing. It is a thing that certainly carries forward into the New Testament, and it's certainly for us today. Matthew 7:24. Matthew 7:24. I think some we're very familiar with. And that would not, yes. Therefore, whoever hears these things of mine and does them, I will liken him to the wise man who built his house upon the rock. So we know about this wise builder, and so he had the wisdom to do it properly, built on the rock. Not like the foolish guy. Everyone who does not hear these things of mine and does not do them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. So throughout the New Testament, it talks about wisdom and how important it is to have it and to search for it, and when you have it, to hold on to it, and many, many verses that help us with wisdom. Thoughts, comments as we close on wisdom? How do we get it? Pray for it, search for it. We'll be looking at other verses in Proverbs for sure about it, but the right use of knowledge and doing it with God in mind, I think is a good way to think of it. So Sunday, we'll go on to the folly of fools. Proverbs talks a lot about fools and trouble that they get into. So we'll be talking about the folly of fools on Sunday. Again, looks like lots of verses to be reading and studying, so please take time to do that if you're able to do that. Also, Proverbs got 31 chapters, so if you read one chapter a day, in a month you'll have it all read. So that'd be great. Thank you.